Brandon? Adam? Yeah. We came with Bob Taylor last year. Probably, yeah, I've been here with him this year. Try not to keep too long. Second. I believe she teed us up. She's going to go first and tee you guys up. Food truck. That's not related to him. But it's in my world. Yeah, it is. Right.
Oh, you got your glasses on you.
You got it. I think you're right on. Probably wide open.
We make it on the way down here. We're doing he was asking for like CD. I texted him right after that. I was like, we don't have to worry about him.
Excellent. Well, thanks again for having us. Absolutely. Anytime. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
please speak into the microphone, which I wasn't doing, so we're calling the meeting to order now. I didn't know, okay, let's hold on just a second. I did not realize that Doug stepped out. So we'll put that on pause.
Oh, you were just here. No, probably. It has some alcohol. Oh.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're back. If y'all would stand up and join me for the prayer and remove your covers, and then we'll go to the pledge. Lord, thank you for bringing us all tonight together to do your work. Thank you for all the turnout from our community. Let us use your wisdom in guiding our decisions tonight, and let us be your instrument as we go about our daily lives. In your name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, justice for all. All right, thanks everyone. I'd like to introduce John Barlow, our town manager, which most everybody knows, but he's going to give us a brief introduction as to why we're here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good evening. I'm glad you're here. We're all here. I think you're going to find this session very informative on a couple of different subjects. We're going to start tonight. Rebecca's going to lead us off and just give us a brief overview of what our land use plan is, what its purpose is, how we got to where we are with it today from where we were a few years ago. I know there's been some interest of, updating the land use plan and what that might entail. To help us with that, we've asked some consultants that we've done some work with in the past with Withers and Ravenel, and I will let them introduce themselves when we get to that point. After what they'll do is they'll follow Rebecca, and they'll go into a little bit more detail about, what it would be about, what would it include if we were to look at updating the plan, what the process is, what the plan is about, why we use it, and how it works. And I think that's going to be a big part of our discussion, is to get a better understanding. Although they're two different documents, your UDO and your land use plan, how they're integrally tied together, but they're separate. So I think that'll be a really interesting piece for us to discuss. And then last, when they're finished, then Rebecca will take it back over again, and we'll get a little bit deeper. We'll talk about things in the UDO, specifically about the conversation we had last night, follow up on that a little bit more about food trucks. I hope you find it informative. Again, this is all about, I think, it's important that we get a better understanding of, why we have these, the UDO, what its purpose is, regulatory purposes versus more of the policy guide. And you'll hear more about the land use plan as a policy guide. I think that's really important for us to understand those differences. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca. If you have questions, stop us any time along the way. But again, this is just a work session. We will not be taking any action. Of course, in the discussion, if for any of us here, consultants, please ask us. I think that's the purpose of tonight.
So just to reiterate what John said, there's not going to be a discussion or comments section tonight. It's just for educational purposes. We won't be taking any action at all. We're just here to be educated and to help educate the public as to what our plan is. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but go ahead, Rebecca.
All right, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay, I'll try my best. This one's a little low. So I'm going to start with just a brief overview of what our CAMA land use plan is and its function. Again, this is I wouldn't say informal, but it's more of a discussion and educational format. So if you guys do need me to clarify anything, or if you have any questions, please stop me at any point. So to get started, a little bit of background on what or where our CAMA land use plan came from. So Coastal Area Management Act is what CAMA stands for. And that act requires each of the 20 coastal communities, which we are one of, to have a local land use plan in accordance with guidelines established by the Coastal Resources Commission. So the guidelines provided, they kind of give a format and a set of issues that may or must be considered during the planning process, which was all implemented during not just our current one, but in the past as well. So what we have today, our current plan was adopted and created in 2009, and most recently an update was completed and adopted in 2019, and that's the one that we really heavily focus and reference on a day-to-day basis. So in general, land use plans should be frequently updated every 5 to 10 years to reflect our changing development conditions. And as we're kind of seeing today, the environment we're in is our current board has a little bit of potentially a different opinion than our past board on how they want to direct development, and even the development patterns that we're seeing are changing as well from what they were in 2019. So that's why it's really important to stay on top of updating the plan and really making sure it reflects what we want to see going forward as far as smart and environmentally savvy development. So kind of a good do's and don'ts for the function of our CAMA land use plan. I'll start with the do's. So, and Jeff pulled me aside and said he liked number 1. So communicate a community's vision and goals for the future. It really is all focused on community engagement and public input to what their visions are for the town's growth as well. So especially in our 2019 update, there was a lot of community input and surveys and public meetings that were conducted to formulate what you see today. And I think going forward, of course, if we were going to update it again, and Withers Revenue will touch on this, having that community engagement should and hopefully would be a big part of that. Next is it provides a roadmap for future rezonings, which you guys have seen in the recent past development and investment decisions. It provides guidance on policy and regulatory updates, and it also guides the deliberate, slow transition of land uses and zonings to hopefully be in the direction that the town is aiming for. And a couple don'ts, we don't want to handcuff decision makers during rezonings. We don't want to infringe on existing uses or buildings. We don't want to invoke or force down zonings. We don't want to create nonconformities, and we don't want to change development regulations. So this is really more of a guideline. It's something to reference. It's not really something that strictly says yes or no to development. So it's really, it goes in conjunction with our UDO, which is our regulatory document that gives us the set rules. Any questions or comments before I keep going?
You can find it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I interpret that as it gives like a really strict regulation or something to where if someone came with a proposal or an application, it gave you a clear guideline saying, no, you can't approve this. That's how I would interpret that. Does anyone else have anything to add?
Sure. I think just to piggyback off that, and we'll touch on it a bit here in a moment, but maybe one real-life example of a handcuffing scenario would be, let's say hypothetically you have a multifamily development that moves forward, and you look, as part of that decision, you look to your guiding document, which is your future land use plan or your CAMA land use plan, and you look at that future land use map designation that very specifically outlines ideal land uses, of which are not multifamily or apartments, but essentially that development request does seem feasible in that area, just maybe at the time that plan was created, that specific development type wasn't anticipated on that parcel, right? So I think with that strict kind of enforcement and outlook on that specific parcel being designated as an area not appropriate for an apartment development, you as decision makers using that map as a guide would essentially have to say, well, our future land use map is inconsistent in this area, so we don't feel good, we don't feel comfortable about moving forward with that specific development type.
Okay, we good?
One for you, Rebecca.
Mm-hmm.
On the dues, I guess I
Sorry,
need
could you use
microphone,
your
please.
microphone?
They can't hear you.
microphone. Sorry. Yeah, under the dues, last bullet, guide the deliberate, slow transition of land uses and zoning. What does that mean to me when you say guide the deliberate, slow transition? I guess I emphasize the word slow transition of land uses and zoning. What does that mean?
So you want to deliberately develop your existing land in a smart and a deliberate way. So you're forming your plan to what you want to see that development to be. You don't just want to have drastic changes depending on what your application you're seeing. You want it to be consistent, and you want it to be guided, and you want it to follow the path that you've set up in your future land use plan.
Well, let me rephrase my question then. Why is the word slow in there? I mean, I just feel like reading through the land use plan, the several times I have recently, it feels like it was something to throw roadblocks in the way of progress.
Well,
And I know that was not the intent. I
well,
know
that
wasn't
could
the
have
intent.
been the interpretation of what the past board and what the past community wanted to make our future development be. And if you guys have a different opinion on that, then that would be something to discuss. Maybe
Got it.
slow is the wrong use of word.
You try to hook go out to.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a B1 property against the RA.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the next probable rezoning along that boundary?
Right.
The residential RA, agricultural, and B1, but
Right.
B1 sandwiched in the middle, RA. Right?
Yep, that's a recent scenario that we had. Well, typically, you would want some sort of transitional buffer. That would be ideal, but that doesn't always happen.
Would a better word be thoughtful instead
Yeah.
of slow?
Yeah.
I think it doesn't,
That's what I
Doesn't
mean
come
by
across.
transition. Slow part,
That was a good word, thoughtful.
Okay.
it happens over,
I'm just
a
going to write that in.
different
my
use
slide.
of word. Got it.
if you were to build slow is a relative.
so I got a question too, not to put you on the spot, but where did we get these do's and don'ts from? Is that a printed out guideline from the state or something?
I pulled it from past presentations that we've had on our CAMA land use plan, and I tweaked them a little bit, but it was mostly from past presentations that boards have gotten with
Over
CAMA land
the
use plans.
previous years?
Yeah.
So that's consistent with what we've been doing in the past?
Mm-hmm. Are we good to move on? Okay. So some of our current CAMA land use plan values that we see in the 2019 update, charm, history, community, and character, which is, I would argue, is the heart of our town, our really unique historic downtown, transitions to the next one, which is our downtown again. there is an emphasis on traffic congestion and Highway 24 issues, which we've seen a lot of recently as well. Environment and wetlands, managing growth, open spaces and agriculture, which we have seen pretty recently in the past as well, and to maintain quality of life. So I think a lot of these could kind of segue into the dues that we are questioning a little bit. Is in order to properly execute these values, sometimes you do have to manage growth in a slow way. So you're not missing details and that you're doing things the correct way. So that could be a way to interpret that statement. Do you guys have anything to add on what you would like to see be maybe different values or added values? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as long as they're reflective of the community as a whole, and I think that they are. I mean, from everyone I've talked to, the downtown area is dear, the history, the charm of the town, and that's what brings people, that's what gives us our identity, and, yeah, so that's.
Okay. You guys wouldn't have any values that you would want to add to the list, or you think it's pretty comprehensive and consistent with?
Well, good list. Have to work.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that's a good point.
Like that,
You said economic growth.
growth.
Okay.
Yeah, talking to the microphone. No.
Right. I say economic growth ought to be part of our, or those values as well.
Okay. And next we have what you guys most frequently see out of our CAMA land use plan, which is the future land use map.
Heat map.
So this is what our planning board uses to make their recommendations for pretty much all decisions that they bring to you guys, or recommendations that they bring to you guys. Everything they base it off of is whether or not it's consistent with our plan in this map or not, and that's the recommendation, whether it is a good one or not, is based off of. And in a lot of cases, you guys don't have to make your decision off of this, but it should be a guiding tool. That's what it was designed for decisions that you guys see.
How long have we been using this map as a graphic? Just curious. Because I don't think it's accurate.
It was part of the 2019.
Yeah. 2000.
I'm sorry, you'll have to use your microphone if you're going to talk.
We got the all, too.
Oh, it is. Okay. All right. We already know this is. This is the Exxon, the Walmart, right? It's what? The pig. Okay, the Piggly Wiggly. Sorry, you got the Exxon state, but you got the Handy Mart right there, and the pig, right? And then all the way up here, you got the traditional old ABC store, and you got the Walmart, right? But in here, it's a long series of strip malls and a Waffle House right now, and ice cream shops, and the raceway and everything else. But it's zoned incorrectly on this map. Am I right or wrong? No, it needs to look like, but this is what if this is future development, this is behind, because it says it's suburban residential right there. But it's not. That's where I'm going with this. It's not really showing where we are today. And every time I look at this, I kind of like, why is this way? Because what you're going to see is this heat map growing and growing along that corridor. And I think we ought to take some time and update our graphics and depict what's actually there. Because you have furniture, you have a furniture store, lawyer's office, and strip malls from here to here. And then behind that, you've got suburban, multifamily, density housing and stuff like that, right? Everyone lives here, right? Everyone knows what I'm talking about. On the other side of there, you got auto parts stores, and you've got restaurants, and you've got a car dealership. So I wouldn't call that residential either. Okay, on both sides of that corridor. I'm just asking for it to get updated in the future. That's it.
So that's certainly something that can be discussed when we are talking about updates that this map could potentially be a part of that. I do get your point, Doug, that it doesn't necessarily reflect what we currently have, but this map is supposed to guide where in 2019 they deemed they would want to see that type of development come in the future.
Well, it's
So,
a little late, isn't it?
well, it's
Mhm.
been a few years, so that's why we're discussing updating it.
We've been about 6 years, and it's usually 5 to 10 years, so we're
Yeah,
kind of
we're
like
right in the middle
middle.
of that time
Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
So it's time to start maybe thinking about it,
Mhm.
possibly.
But this map here is a little bit more representative of the way it actually is. I don't know if we
Right.
can incorporate that into.
Yeah, the
'cause
function of
we
this,
use this map a lot.
and Withers can comment on this if they have anything else to add, but I don't think the full function of this map is supposed to completely reflect what we see currently. It's more supposed to show how we would want to guide future development. Do you guys have anything you want to add to that?
Not really. I don't think, I look at that as a reference document to where we are currently. It's got to reflect the actual information that,
Well,
if you're going to provide me information as a decision maker, you need to show me the reality of what is today, not what we wish it was today.
yeah, our zoning map shows what it currently is
Yeah.
today.
Okay.
This map is a reference to what
That map.
the community and what the current board wanted as far as guiding future development. So I do see your point, but I think the function of this map is a little bit
Well,
different.
I'm just saying, it's a little late. We're not going to go down and tear down furniture stores and pizza
No, of
places.
course not.
So Winters Ravenel you had something you wanted to
Yeah.
add, right?
This is more like it. This is what we should be seeing every meeting, and this is the guiding document. When we're making these decisions of what is and what will be. That is a decade or more, like, that doesn't even begin to describe the development in Swansboro. It's just not accurate, that's all I'm saying. I think it ought to be never be seen again.
Absolutely. I think, certainly fair to say a lot has changed in town since the crafting of the current future land use map constructed in 2019. And certainly a major component, if not the most important component of your CAMA land use plan is that future land use map, because it's your guide for future development. Now, what I can speak to, and
Let me just answer this. If
Doug,
it's my
let
guide,
him finish his
No.
thought, please.
if it's my guide,
Let him finish his thought.
okay. I just want to say, if it's my guide,
Let him finish his thought.
okay, let him finish this thought.
and I think we'll cover a good deal of this in our presentation here coming up, but certainly a few factors that go into the construction of a future land use map at the time of a land use plan update is one, an existing land use map. So you'll have a new existing land use map at the time of the comprehensive plan update. That'll take into account tax parcel data from the county that includes existing land coverage information. So you'll have a map that allows you to know exactly where you are in terms of coverage and what different types of uses exist on different types of parcels. So that's a major informant of a future land use map, right? Making sure you're starting with what you know is currently on the ground to best guide a new map that would serve as that future land use map part of the plan.
I understand what you're saying, okay? But what it says here is land use plan update, okay? That's what it actually says. And when you have both sides of that corridor for over what is almost a statute mile, that is got B1 businesses on both sides of it, and you show me, hey, the only thing allowed in here, or the only thing that we will consider in here is residential use. And you have a bullet that says, don't handcuff decision makers during rezonings.
Oh, I completely understand. I think that's, to your exact point, that's where the importance of having a flexible and up-to-date future land use map comes into play. So
I think we
absolutely.
should have an update for what is and what will be. Okay?
Absolutely.
And as we guide these decisions that definition Joe came up, guide deliberate slow transition in land uses and zoning. That's, to me, I'm just saying that it's just not accurate. All right.
Okay, Rebecca, you'd like to continue?
Well, that was pretty much the end of my brief overview. Did you want me to add a point about that? Unless you guys had anything else that you wanted me to go over, that's when I was going to transition into Withers Ravenel's update on what if you guys did have things you wanted to change, whether you wanted a full overhaul or a simple update to our current CAMA land use plan. They will go into details on what our options are and what that would kind of look like. So.
Yeah, but that would not happen tonight. This is just.
Oh, this is just informative,
Yep.
and they're just here to give you guys information on what it would look
Yeah,
like.
so just so everybody's clear on that, this is just informative only, and no decisions will be made tonight.
Can you pass that?
So obviously, it's a passionate topic to everyone. So let's just all take a deep breath. Would y'all like to take a 5-minute break, or you want to keep going? We're just into it 30 minutes, so I would you good? Okay, let's go ahead then. Yes, sir, you go right ahead. You got the clicker. You go.
Okay, here we go. Hey,
There we go. Excellent.
they can like introduce.
So we had a suggestion, if you gentlemen from Winters Ravenel would just introduce yourselves, because Doug has not had the opportunity to meet
Absolutely.
you. So he knows, and it's on the record as well, too.
Absolutely. I'm going to pull this mic cord just a little bit to give us some wiggle room here. Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Justice, members of the board. My name is Greg Feldman. I'm a project manager with the Withers Ravenel Community Planning Team. Alongside me this evening are my colleagues, Mr. Adam Culpepper and Adam Caldwell. We specialize, our community planning team, in comprehensive land use planning, unified development ordinance updates, small area planning, parks and recreation planning across the state of North Carolina. And it's our pleasure to be with you this evening to really piggyback off of the brief presentation that Rebecca just ran through with you all. We're going to take a more deep dive into what goes into the comprehensive plan process, specifically the CAMA land use plan update process. What are key milestones and steps along the way? How do we engage the community throughout that process? And of course, most importantly, what's the end result look like? What's the final product look like? So we're very excited to be with you this evening. I especially heard some great conversation and questions that I think our presentation will certainly touch on and hopefully answer. We'll make sure to reserve some time at the conclusion of our slides this evening to have some Q&A with the board. So without further ado, I will just share a brief agenda. This is to loosely guide our conversation this evening, what we plan to discuss with you all, and that's first and foremost starting with what is a comprehensive land use plan. I think it's always nice to have a refresher on what that document is, what it consists of, how is it used by appointed and elected officials and certainly staff, when specifically development submittals move forward in the town, and why is it important that we update it. Next, we'll share a little bit about our team's approach in coastal communities and small to mid-sized communities across the state. We'll also share some tools that we use as part of the land use plan update process to garner the most out of community engagement, to get the most involvement. So you certainly end up with an end product, a land use plan that's reflective of the community's values that Rebecca shared with you all from the 2019 plan. And lastly, what is the final product? This is meant to be a document that is used on a day-to-day basis. It is a guiding document, so it's certainly not, it's an advisory document, not a regulatory document such as the UDO, which I'll speak to more in just a moment. But how do you use this plan, this ultimate end product, to inform decisions, right? Not just thinking in terms of land use. Of course, it is a CAMA land use plan, but as we'll discuss in just a few slides, a comprehensive plan, it's in the name. It touches a variety of operations and functions of the community. So right here, I think, is a good slide to talk just briefly about what a comprehensive land use plan is. Well, of course, it's a community conversation. It's a shared vision for the future of the town. So everyone gets a seat at the table to share what's on top of their mind in terms of the priority list as it relates to transportation, land use, housing, parks and recreation, and a variety of other topics that you'll see in these green circles. All of these elements, just as example, are components of a land use plan. Of course, having an up-to-date comprehensive plan helps inform staff and leadership, helps them prioritize community goals, which we'll discuss in just a minute. And by North Carolina general statute, having a comprehensive land use plan is a requirement to enforce zoning. You all don't have to worry about that, of course. You have a comprehensive land use plan constructed in 2019, but it is required to enforce zoning. So, of course, having an up-to-date one when you're looking for a guide in future decisions to make as a board is beneficial in that regard. And lastly, I think this is a topic that's come up already tonight, but a comprehensive plan is advisory. It is not a regulatory document. It is not your rule book that you're looking for to enforce parcel by parcel and development by development specific regulations. But it is that guide that's important to have, up to date, of course, because when you are faced with a tough decision on a very impactful development as a board, you want to make sure that you have a tool that you can look to and are confident in that's been vetted by the public in the form of that up-to-date future land use map that you can point to and say, we've considered this specific area of town and feel that this use being presented to us is either compatible or incompatible with our vision for this area. So I'll jump along to my next slide. These four phases you'll see are our primary phases as part of any comprehensive land use plan update in the state of North Carolina. I myself am the project manager, as I mentioned. I've worked on several CAMA land use plan updates as well as comprehensive plan updates in general across the state. We'll share some ongoing and recent project experience from some nearby coastal communities in just a minute. Actually with me tonight, this evening, is Mr. Adam Culpepper, senior planner with our Withers Ravenel community planning team. Adam brings a wealth of knowledge, primarily in eastern North Carolina with regulatory policy updates. Adam's been coined the UDO guy in our office, but he certainly brings nearly a decade of local government experience as well, and specializes in all things law and legislation and unified development ordinance updates. Mr. Daniel Rowell, that you'll see there, and not to belabor this slide, but Daniel Rowell specializes in parks and recreation, which I know the town does an excellent job of. Daniel Rowell really specializes in finding ways to enhance a community's recreation system should it come up, which it commonly does throughout a land use plan update. And lastly of the four phases is Mr. Brian Rubino, professional geologist out of our Powell's Point in Wilmington, North Carolina office. Brian Rubino is our director of coastal resources, who has a wealth of experience in the field of nature-based solutions, most commonly referred to as living shorelines, as some of you all are familiar with. Brian is very much so plugged in with the coastal resiliency and planning world. Those are just a few faces. The benefit of our project team, I would say, in the variety of projects that we work on, that we also work right next door and sit next to landscape architects for enhanced graphics to do more showing and less telling as part of a land use plan. I think visuals go a very long way. And we also work closely with our civil engineers to make sure what we are planning and drawing on a map is actually feasible. That's just an example of our deep bench, and I will say we certainly have local knowledge and familiarity with coastal communities specifically. I'll plug my familiarity with the area. I have been visiting and actually coming down and spending my summers in Swansboro my entire life. My parents actually live in town, so I certainly have some familiarity with the area over the last few decades. And we also have several folks, as I mentioned, our primary work on the coast is operated out of our Wilmington, North Carolina office, so not too far down the road. We'll jump ahead through this slide because I already touched on it briefly. These are just a few examples on this slide here of projects and communities that we work in the 20 coastal counties in North Carolina. So you'll see we've covered most of the coast, and these project types consist of CAMA land use plan updates, unified development ordinance updates. We also have a on-call planning services wing. So we serve as planning staff in a few communities on an on-call basis. We also work on, as I mentioned, downtown or small area plans and parks and recreation master plans. And so now I want to talk about the process. I think this is a very important slide because it does hit on very key milestones along the way of a CAMA land use plan update. And so I will stop after each slide, each row here, and talk just a little bit about what that means in more detail than the text that you'll read here. Our approach to updating a CAMA land use plan or a comprehensive land use plan in general often consists of 3 tasks. We like to break it up so it's more digestible to the community when we build out a schedule that really helps paint the timeline of the process to keeping everyone informed along the way. But beginning with that task 1, that kickoff, our team actually goes in, utilizes some of the existing data provided by the town, including its previous planning efforts, which I know the town has spent a great deal of time and energy and, of course, money on previous planning efforts that very much so will still have relevant ideas that can help inform some of the components of a land use plan update. For example, the town's recently completed Parks and Recreation Plan certainly has policies and recommendations within it that could be housed under the one umbrella of a comprehensive land use plan. So pulling recommendations from previous planning efforts so that those documents do not just sit on a shelf. The good ideas that were formed through engagement at the time of their creation are moved forward. In addition to that, as part of the CAMA land use plan process and the Coastal Resources Commission review, a project team, when updating a CAMA land use plan, is required to construct a series of maps, specifically inundation and storm models, storm surge models, maps as part of the CAMA land use plan process. We'll map coastal wetlands, existing land use with exact percentages shown of land coverage in town and so forth. Not to bore the board with those details, but there are a great deal of required maps. So you will get that up-to-date perspective in the community as part of that data gathering step. And we'll also construct the community profile component. So that'll include population projections. The Coastal Area Management Act requires population projections to be shown at a 30-year timeline, so out 30 years with 5-year intervals. Those include both seasonal and full-time population projections. And we'll also gather some background sociographic and demographic data. Next is our first kind of in-person kickoff event. We like to start by having a full-day event in town to get that boots-on-the-ground experience and community feel. That typically begins with a meeting with department heads so that we can understand the priority list from various town department heads, understand pressure points that may exist, and start preliminarily finding ideas on how to address those items. That's typically our full-day event where we'll roll that into our first project steering committee meeting. So each land use plan that we work on has a dedicated steering committee who really functions as a sounding board between the community and the plan update itself to make sure that they're kind of the first line of defense when we present our ideas and professional thoughts on the current state in the form of recommendations of the community. That steering committee is there to vet those ideas before they go in the form of a public meeting. But that evening, that full-day event, that community tour and kickoff day concludes with a public open house. We like to share that preliminary background data that we collected, those maps that I discussed, some ideas from previous plans, and start to get that early reaction from the community and hopefully an early gauge on where priorities may sit. So again, I mentioned this third cell. That's your project steering committee. Those are your project champions. They're involved throughout the process in a series of meetings with us to review materials prior to those going out to the public. We also like to have stakeholder interviews. That's just another layer of engagement, which we'll talk about a little more in a moment. Those stakeholder groups, we really like to divvy those up into different focus areas. So for instance, if we have a kind of emerging theme of parks and recreation early on throughout the project, we like to have specialists in that field, whether that be a community ambassador or staff themselves as a stakeholder to provide their input on the perspective through a parks and recreation lens that may impact the comprehensive plan development. We certainly like to have members of the development community as part of the stakeholder interviews to get a little bit about what their pressure points may be in town and maybe what frustrations or prohibitors they've seen in the current land use plan or perhaps the current UDO. And just by example, those are a few example stakeholders that we like to interview as part of that step in the process. We also like to have regular updates to the elected officials, of course, this board here throughout the process to make sure that you all are plugged in, which I know You would be along the way, very much so at all the numerous engagement events that take place. But for lack of better words, task one can be really summarized as a data collection phase. And so taking us into task two, that's your visioning and plan development. This is really where my opinion, where the rubber meets the road, right? So we kick things off in task two with a heavy emphasis on a community survey. As you all just mentioned, we, as part of the 2019 plan, a large informer of plan goals often comes from A, community input early on through an open house, but B, certainly through results of a community survey where questions will be carefully crafted to get the most out of in terms of perspectives from residents and visitors who take the time to complete that survey. So that survey is very, very important, as well as all engagement events, because it does really shape the direction of the plan in terms of its plan vision, which is a guiding statement, often 3 to 4 sentences, sometimes longer, sometimes even shorter, that actually guides individual plan goals, which we'll talk about more in just a moment. Yes, sir.
Yeah, but I think we can hit it at the end, you said.
Okay, sure.
Done briefing the process.
Absolutely.
I'm just going to have a question on your survey.
Okay, absolutely. We will be ready to answer that. Just to keep moving along here through our kind of our overview, our process schedule and flow. We will then, after that community survey is launched, go to the drawing board, craft a draft vision statement and plan goals based on the responses we have fielded. Share those first with the steering committee to make sure we have time to make any final tweaks that they feel from their perspective being community ambassadors are necessary. And then we'll actually roll that plan vision statement and overarching goals out in the form of a public meeting where we'll have interactive board elements that folks can react to, either a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Did we hit the mark here? How are we off? Please share your thoughts. That's most commonly in the form of an open house where we actually like to sometimes leverage local events, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. And then kind of one of the steps that we've talked about already this evening, but certainly a huge and critical component, as you all know very much so, of a land use plan is its future land use map and recommendations. So that future land use map, of course, in the town's sake, is certainly used as a primary guide when development submittals are presented, so that you can look at a future land use map and feel confident with it, that it's considered this particular area in town and you're comfortable with how the process took place and designated a certain parcel for a specific type of development, or is the case that you would like to build in a little more flexibility in terms of the future land use map, where you don't have your arms tied in the case of maybe it's a controversial application, or maybe it's a very good development submittal that, the future land use map is crafted in such a strict manner that it doesn't really give you any wiggle room to look elsewhere or make a decision otherwise. So that's really that big and final stop of task two, your visioning and plan development, is the creation of that future land use map. We're going to chat a little bit more about a future land use map here in a couple of slides and how we get the most out of interaction from the community on that map, as well as appointed and elected officials through ArcGIS Online and actually an interactive web mapping software that our team has started utilizing. So I'm excited to share that with you all in just a minute. But of course, accompanying that future land use map are your plan action items, commonly referred to as recommendations. Those are your concrete steps to achieving what you want to achieve as a town. Really, typically a plan's crafted for looking through a 25-year, 20 or 25-year lens. But really, we like to set those as actionable steps that are accomplished in between at a short, medium, and long-term time frame. Short commonly being 1 to 3 years, kind of your low-hanging fruit. What are you ready to go ahead and address as soon as this plan's adopted? Your medium term maybe takes a little more legwork and due diligence to accomplish those recommendations and action items. Those will sit right in that 3 to 5 year mark. And then your 5 and ongoing efforts are stuff that you need as a town to reevaluate almost on an annual basis and continue implementing as time goes on. So certainly land use plan, 2 very critical components in it, often tucked at the very back of the land use plan. I'm not sure why. But those are your future land use map and your action items or your recommendations. And so really that brings us to our final task. That's refinement and adoption. We strategically incorporate at bare minimum 2 months for this kind of task 3, this final phase. And the reason being is we like to present to the elected officials kind of the final product. Again, recap exactly what steps took place throughout that process. How did we get to the conclusions that we did make? And then actually post that material, that full draft of the plan online for public review and comment at a bare minimum 2-month time frame. And that's so that we can all, at the end of the process, leave with a plan that we feel comfortable and can back confidently. And that process summarized really here. I think that last slide was a little hard to follow, but broken it down into six steps here. That's your initiation and analysis, your background data review at task 1, rolling you into your community engagement. That's the survey to help you understand what those local goals and priorities are. Then we get to use that information, present it to the public to vet what we heard, right? Make sure what we heard is indeed accurate and on top of mind for community members. Then we go and assemble the materials. Now that we have the community's blessing and folks are on board and confident with the direction the plan's heading in, we assemble that document and then roll it out, of course, as I mentioned, with adequate time for the community to review and provide comment. So now I want to talk about a very, very crucial stop in a land use plan process. And when I mistakenly said stop, this is on numerous occasions, a successful land use plan should have ample community engagement opportunities to make sure that you have a plan that is indeed reflective of where the town currently stands and wants to see itself go in the future. And so that's why our motto of community-led plan development is really meeting people where they are. Historically, I think the norm of community engagement has been hosting an event in town hall where folks may or may not decide to show, and may or may not feel inclined to share their thoughts in their mind because that's not necessarily a setting that they're most comfortable in. We certainly understand that, and that's why the project team has really started leveraging local events. Of course, you'll see here upcoming Mullet Festival poster, just by example, events that we like to leverage. Of course, Christmas candlelight there in the top right. Anything where foot traffic exists, right? We like to use that opportunity to hear from the community again in a space that they feel most comfortable in. On the bottom left, you'll see a little icon with a set of monkey ears. That's SurveyMonkey. That's the platform that we use that I anticipate a few questions at the end of this process on how we carefully craft those questions to make sure we get the most from the community in terms of feedback and ideas that generate that plan vision and overall goals for the document. And what I touched on earlier in my presentation, which you probably can't see in that picture in the bottom right just due to its size, but most recently our team has seen great success in utilizing ArcGIS Online, specific software to get the most feedback on, again, that extremely critical component of a comprehensive land use plan's future land use map. So this next slide that I'm going to segue us into really shows an example actually from a community we're currently working in, which is the town of Oak Island in Brunswick County. We have used ArcGIS Online to actually create a story map where we can share different ideas and thoughts on certain character areas is the term we've used for your future land use designations that'll be found in your future land use map. We've used that to post on the dedicated project webpage for residents, appointed and elected officials and staff to have kind of a one-stop shop to look at materials and actually become educated on exactly where the process is, how did we come to these conclusions in the form of these different designations, and then we actually have an embedded future land use map within that web page that you can click on. It's very, very user friendly as long as you're not using a mobile device or phone. You can get away with using an iPad, but certainly a stationary computer works best for this program. but it's actually very, very user-friendly. I'm sure some of you all have used Onslow County GIS in the past. But this, we've seen great success in interacting with community members of all age in this online mapping software that we've recently started leveraging. You folks can actually navigate that map, see different designations in town as they sit, according to where we stand with the draft future land use map once we're comfortable rolling out a draft vision for the future in the form of that land use map. We'll roll that out to the community, and you can actually search by owner name, parcel number, address. Of course, most folks will immediately go to their home address and see what the designation is, or maybe a place that they frequent. You can actually go and click on that particular part of town. It'll share more information about what that designation means, what inappropriate and appropriate uses might be in the future on that particular piece of land, and actually share a comment. So you can actually drop a pin and share a comment right then and there on your thoughts that we'll use to continue refining and reshaping the future land use map. So certainly a very, very, very effective tool that we've seen really proven success with on previous projects. And so lastly, to kind of close the circle on what is the final product, there's a ton of information that goes into a comprehensive land use plan. Of course, the future land use map, but very much so right next to it, an important factor, or an important component, rather, is the implementation chapter of your land use plan. How are you going to move, or how are you going to use this document to move the community forward in a healthy manner over the next 10 years or life of the document? And so that's what you're seeing here on the left side of the screen. This is our team's approach to structuring an implementation chapter, a playbook, if you will, where you can actually really rip apart the last chapter of the plan and kind of know your exact roadmap to the future by looking through this one particular chapter. An important aspect of a strong implementation chapter to keep in mind is something that's digestible. And that's why we've kind of not created, but found success in this tiered approach, starting with a goal, which is that clear statement that describes an overarching theme or a long-term outcome. But it is broad, yet clear on what's intended to be accomplished. That's followed by your objective. That's a more specific and measurable outcome that contributes to achieving that overarching goal. And then, as we've discussed in my previous slides, you have your concrete action items, right? How are we going to, maybe it's an update to the UDO. What that action item is going to be a specific direction, specific language on a particular aspect that you can actually really, as staff, use, plug into your ordinance, and update it, right? That's an actionable step. That's an action item as part of this implementation chapter. I glossed over, but certainly didn't mean to. An important component of a land use plan is certainly the CAMA compliance aspect. Again, as a municipality within our 20 coastal counties, there is a checklist of sorts. There are guidelines outlined by the Division of Coastal Management, ultimately reviewed by the Coastal Resources Commission, that this plan will have to address. The Coastal Management Act does have 5 management topics that our action items will need to address in some form or fashion. Certainly land use compatibility being one of those, public access, water quality, transportation and utilities are those 5 management topics that are very, very important and must be addressed and reviewed ultimately by those folks that sit on the Coastal Resources Commission. So we absolutely have a quality assurance and quality control check once our land use plan is wrapped up to make sure that we're meeting those guidelines. And that's going to bring me to my last slide. Hope I wasn't too long-winded, but we're certainly able to field any questions. I'm sure that was a lot of information. So I'm sure we have all 3 of us here. You're happy to, you're welcome to ask us anything, and we'll do our best to give you an answer. But thank you again for the opportunity to be with you this evening.
Anything?
Anything
Oh, that's
you
a
want.
pretty big open.
You got a question? Go ahead.
Anything that's on your
Go ahead.
anything that's
Ask
on your mind.
No, ask away.
No, I got a couple. I know Doug's
Yeah.
up.
And I can also jump back to slides if you all. It looks like you have them in front of you, so that's great.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, when somebody says you can ask me anything. You gotta be
Anything you'd
careful
like.
with that, right?
Anything you'd like, Commissioner Brown.
Hey, the steering committee, the members of the steering committee, generally volunteers from the town, correct?
Generally, volunteers from the town. I will say on recent projects, we've asked a lot of time from those committee members, and really ask for those individuals to be willing to dedicate, set aside that time to be a part of the update process. We leave it up to the community whether that's a board or, excuse me, a committee that's either voted on by this board or the planning board, or maybe it's a combination of members from both. We've worked in some communities that require an application to be on that steering committee. We've worked in other communities that we really just hope they had enough folks to form a steering committee, right? So those are volunteers.
Okay, stakeholder interviews. Okay, stakeholder interviews, community surveys. Difference being?
Stakeholder interviews are actually in-person or virtual meetings, often one-on-one with individuals that specialize in a particular field or have a particular obligation, right, occupation. Whether they're part of the development community, they are a home builder in the community maybe that has a few ongoing projects or who has done a lot of work in the town. We want to, of course, hear from them on their perspective because it's an important one. They have a lot of time and money invested in the community. As I mentioned, I think earlier on in my presentation, often that stakeholder group really consists of individuals that specialize in different focus areas, parks and recreation being one of them, or anything else that the town may identify as an area of interest. We want to hear from a particular professional in that field that lives in the community.
So your stakeholder then is like professional people who have commitments in town?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
So, but do we include any of the property owners, like say Mr. Brown or Mr. Jeff down there? Any individual? I guess what I'm trying to get is, I got it, the stakeholder, and believe me, this community is very aware of people that are coming here to build stuff. I think they enjoy having their input as a stakeholder because they are a stakeholder. I come up from a long military career. Stakeholders are basically just about everybody's involved. Stakeholders in some way, shape, or form.
That's absolutely correct. I mean, the community as a whole, individual residents are incredibly important and are considered stakeholders. The main aspect of these stakeholder interviews are narrowing it down to a select representative, but then we have the community survey all our time when we're coming to events where we get to hear from all the rest of the stakeholders, the rest of the residents.
In my last question, I'll leave you to Doug, man. The community survey, who wrote those questions? I mean, did you do the last one we had?
No, sir. We did not.
Okay, I guess I'm wondering who wrote the questions, because I'll give you an example of the way Joe Brown interprets the questions is, do you want to save the wetlands or do you want to poke in the eye with a sharp stick?
Right.
Which one do you want?
We refrain, and we absolutely will not ask questions that lead to a particular answer. And that's why in this, I panned over to this slide intentionally. You'll see that in our task 2, or in between task 1 and task 2, we have a steering committee and board of commissioners update prior to launching that community survey. That's so we can present to you all the draft community survey questions to make sure that we're asking, in your all's opinion and ours, we're asking the correct questions and phrase them the way that's.
Oh, my next question.
Yes, sir.
Good. Okay. I'm done. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Tamara, you want to go next?
Yeah.
You're
She's
good.
a realtor.
Okay, great.
Might have-
Pat?
I don't really have any questions, but I want to comment on when we did this before. There was a lot of community support. We had people in this place, they were packed. We had storyboards up, and we had people putting sticky notes on things, what they want, and it went from A to Z. And that's really important. And you have that throughout the whole presentation. Community involvement is so important. It's not just us. It's what does this community want to see? And it worked very well last time. It worked very well. So if we're going to redo this whole thing, I'd like to see us have the same kind of involvement with all the community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I cannot say that enough. Just for example, I think what we've seen the most success in terms of public support and involvement in the process is through leveraging local events. We understand that there are certain milestones, especially or particularly when we roll out a plan vision statement and goals, that it's more appropriate to have in a dedicated setting for the land use plan project specifically. But there are also opportunities that we can piggyback off of local events to get that foot traffic in, the most folks walking by our materials, right? So I think both settings are very important, but community engagement is certainly at the top of a land use plan update process.
That stole my thunder. Well, I was involved on a different side of it. I wasn't up here, but I just want to, we recently did our Parks and Rec master plan.
Right.
Some of us were a little disappointed in the participation. It was really low. I don't know if it was a bad time of the year or what, but I'm just hoping we get the same participation as we had this process before, and not that. I don't know if the past way of doing it might work this time. You might need to have to, like I saw a picture up here of, I don't know what, they were outside of some event, like gathering information. I think, that's a good way to go.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
a lot of people, I know for coming here, at the time, I was working, I'd come home from work and try to rush to over to come up here and try to spend as much time as I could absorbing everything, because there was a lot. I mean, it was around the room. So I just hope that the process goes as smooth as last time and we have just as good a participation.
Absolutely, and I think that's why more of an importance is placed on reaching people where they are. We understand that you're getting off work at 5 o'clock to rush to a 6 o'clock informative meeting on the land use plan update. We're going to make sure that your time spent is meaningful, and that at that meeting the materials displayed you're able to very much so easily interact with, or if you're unable to make that meeting, all of these items and materials displayed are publicly available on a dedicated web page for the project. I mentioned the interactive future land use map, just again, building on touch points, right, with the community and offering multiple ways to get involved.
Yeah, when you start like the survey stuff, do you have a goal of a certain number of people that you want to reach?
Well, that's a great question, and of course, my answer would be that it varies and depending on the community population. I'll use metrics or numbers from a recent survey offered in Oak Island as part of the CAMA Land Use Plan update. A full-time population in Oak Island of just about 10,000 folks, seasonal population of anywhere from 20 to 40,000 people. So it fluctuates drastically. We had over 1,000 survey respondents. And that survey was actually launched in the off-season. So that's an extreme, that's, while on paper, a tenth of the permanent population, that's an extreme turnout, because what we'll actually produce as part of those survey results, total respondents, in a summary with the number of outreach methods used, how many open-ended comments were placed in that survey, how many folks took the time to type up a custom response, and how many people completed the full survey. We'll create a confidence interval that's built on how many folks, based on Swansboro's demographic conditions, right, race included in overall diversity, how much of our respondents reflect, the actual community's voices in Swansboro. So that's that confidence interval equation that we'll use to make sure that we're at least 95% confident that in the results that we hear. So that's a percentage is more in a scientific way of giving it to you. A percentage is how we base that confidence. So, all right.
All right, guys, got a couple easy ones for you.
Okay.
You
we're
mentioned
ready.
ArcGIS, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm very familiar with the program and stuff. I use it quite a bit in where I work at.
Okay, excellent.
The the things we can do with it, though, we can do analysis tools on there, like link it to your survey. Can you show us where each of those surveys was returned from on your ArcGIS product? So we know the sampling of which communities, because we're kind of like a diverse community here. We've got a combination of military retired, a younger generation with some college, community college, and some of the people that work to support on base. A lot of those. We've also got a local community business and business leaders here. So we're quite diverse, actually. Based on what we saw, what Joe reflected in his comments, we saw a lot of bias in the first survey that we looked at. And we also saw the demographic that was oversampled horribly. And that's why there was no thing we tagged on there for economic growth, because it didn't represent the people that lived outside of the town center. So I'd like to see in this one, if you're capable of doing that, the sampling. Where are these responses actually coming from? And come along with that, I've got a specific question for you. You don't have to answer me now. Are you familiar with military communities and communities that center around a large military base? Have you ever worked an area like this before to know what this demographic is like?
We have worked in the city of Jacksonville alongside a close sub-consultant of ours, Benchmark Planning, who has done a tremendous amount of military-based planning specifically, and planning in general, and military or military-adjacent communities. So we often rely on them as the professionals, but we have worked alongside them.
Okay.
And
then I got a really easy question for
Sure.
you. What's a timeline? If we decide to give you guys the business to do this, what's the soonest you can do it? And then what's your timeline like? And I've got a follow-up question to that.
Sure, okay. And if I can, very quickly,
Mhm.
we'll come right back to the timeline. I want to address your initial question on can we tell by the location where respondents are coming from?
Yeah.
So first, why it resonated with me, the exact.
I know it's capable in this because we did census patrols when I was in the.
It absolutely is. The short answer is yes. We can
Yes.
absolutely tell. Another thing we've started to take a look at to avoid any biased samples as part of survey results. We can track IP address through SurveyMonkey, so we can weed out through the ultimate Excel file that our results will be spit out in. We can weed out more than 2 or 3 duplicate responses. Just to make sure that obviously some households will be using the same.
Because
computer, but
if I see certain streets overrepresented in their survey, I know that we have an oversampling. I mean, I'd like to see more from people that live in Charleston Park, people that live off of Mile Amex Beach Road. Some of the folks in town call us the box community because, we live in these 90-day wonders that they put up around the town, and we're outside the town center and stuff. And it's hard to get their participation because these are the folks that are wrapped up every day in trying to make a living and pay taxes. And getting their attention for something like this won't be an easy task. Even when I rent, and it's for them that I knocked on over 1,000 doors myself in order to sit where I'm at today, because I represent them as well. That's why I asked that question. And like I said, I'd like to see the data that you guys can provide that for us to make sure we're getting a diverse and well-represented demographic and responses back. Because I think you'll find out some different values come out of that.
And actually, to that exact point, a survey we constructed, I believe yesterday evening, for a suburb in the Triangle area. Actually, the survey started out with a prompt, an interactive map, before you could actually jump to question 2, place a dot on where you're taking the survey or where you live. So we can actually pull all of that information. That's a great point.
And going on the timeline, will you guys be here during those high-stress times? Like, we're challenged transportation-wise when you have the Mullet Fest. If you've been here before for Mullet Fest, you park your car 1.5 miles away, and then you got a couple different modes of transportation. Get down here, the golf cart, shuttle bus, whatever else. Like you said, I saw your slideshow, and it's like, will you be doing some of your data collection during those times as well? We
will, and to answer the question fully, the comprehensive land use plan update timeline, especially in a coastal community with any population influencers, population fluctuations, it spans 12 to 14 months.
Okay.
So you do get a taste of every bit of the season.
Yeah, because we're different in season than we are out of season here.
Absolutely.
After April, this whole place changes quite a bit.
I have kicked off a land use plan project in September and heard very drastic issues, actually issues concerning golf cart and vehicular traffic at the very tail end of the process. But we heard the issue, right? And we were able to address it through an action item in the plan ultimately. So that's strategically about why the process spans a year.
And this may seem like an irrelevant question, but will you be sampling also, like asking, when you go out to survey people, do you actually send live bodies out once in a while during those times when we have a lot of visitors in town, maybe sampling the tourists and stuff like that, saying, hey, where you from? Why'd you come?
As far as at those events that we'll leverage, like
Yeah.
we'll use the Mullet Festival as an example.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We'll have staff dedicated to stationing the booth, and we'll also have staff dedicated to walking around and interacting.
Because that's a demographic we're trying to target more.
Yeah.
In order for revenue. If they're happy, they'll keep coming back.
Right.
Like to get their input there too. All right. I guess the final question is, and I guess our town manager will be able to tell us that later, is how much is going to cost us? Someone's going to have to ask that question,
Yeah,
right?
no, absolutely. And I think, this might be an appropriate time, Rebecca, to speak to an ongoing application that the town has recently submitted. It's called the Resilient Coastal Communities Program, offered by the Department of Environmental Quality, State of North Carolina. NCDEQ is the acronym. They offer an annual program that aids and assistance to the 20 coastal counties and all of the embedded municipalities. And this is the first year that program is assisting with funding for a CAMA land use plan update. We have also submitted an application with interest in working with the town through a land use plan update should both us and the town be selected as a recipient. I believe the total of that grant is around $500,000 for land use plan specifically in three coastal communities. So that's roughly about $120,000, $130,000 per plan. Of course, there are very high expectations from the Department of Environmental Quality on what that plan includes in terms of resiliency-related and oriented efforts that make their way into that land use plan. In a small to mid-sized community of the communities we've worked in over the last 5 years in the state of North Carolina, comprehensive plan ranges between, for us, about $75,000 to $120,000, just depending on the overall scope of the project.
It gets to the reason I ask that, we're about to go into our budget process and approve a budget. So if we know up front what it's going to cost us, then we can factor that number in.
And I apologize.
You came here at the best time.
Well, it sounds like we did, but I apologize. We actually have sent estimates based on scope, different scopes, to staff, so they have that information too.
Yep.
I was going to ask, do you have like a la carte menu that
We
we
actually-
choose from?
We
'Cause
sure do.
contrary to popular belief, I don't think the current land use plan that we have is a bad plan. I just think we need to bring things up and highlight it and maybe clarify some things to keep everybody.
Sure thing. I completely understand that, and that is, and I failed to touch on that when the question was asked, so my apologies. But we have, for lack of better words, a la carte option where we have an update-oriented scope of work, which of course is going to be cost less than a full update. Kind of not scrapping the 2009 and subsequently 2019 updated plan, but certainly a new rewrite with all new data, not really leveraging past data and research as much as a limited scope would. But we have both of those associated costs with staff.
So I just have a couple of questions. Most of them have already been answered, and thank you again for coming and helping us with this. So focus groups, where do you get the focus groups from? How many focus groups? How many people's on the focus groups? Can you kind of?
Well, Rebecca, I'm looking at you. We do lean on staff just with their pulse on the community to form those focus groups. We're certainly here to advise on the formation of them, but staff works with a variety of residents on a daily basis. And so they certainly know either the frequent flyers in town or folks with a particular interest in a certain aspect of the community. So we lean on leadership and staff to form those focus groups with our guidance system.
And I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but what's your thoughts on our current plan?
Well,
Do you care to can you comment on that?
I'm happy to comment at a high level. I'm certainly familiar with, I'm sure we've worked with staff, my team here, with folks who are probably a part of that 2019 plan update. And I don't think there's necessarily anything negative to say about the plan. It just may have been reflective of where the community's priorities sat at that particular point in time in 2019. As Rebecca mentioned, it can be difficult, I will say, to work with data from over 2 decades ago, which would have been from 2009, when a majority of that information was collected that informs the 2019 plan. You know, policy has changed at the state level. Certainly that would impact the elements that go into a land use plan. So I think I know there's benefit in having an up-to-date document, because you get not only up-to-date community perspectives, what's on top of mind at the residents in 2025, but you also get up-to-date data, what is on the ground as of 2025. And that's just not necessarily something that the 2019 plan offers.
Yeah. So we're basically 6 years into our, revision plan.
Right.
So it's getting, if it's not time now, it's getting very close to revisiting that, is what I'm hearing and understanding.
I would say there's a statistic, or there's a metric data point out there somewhere that I came across not too long ago, but it's common practice, I would say, in the communities that we work in. A slow to moderate growing community updates its land use plan about every 10 years. A fast-paced or a medium-paced community updates their land use plan every 5.
Our growth was half of what it was. Our growth is double what it was in 2009. A lot more different people from a lot of different backgrounds have come in our community since that time. And that's why I asked about the data sample.
So, yeah,
We've got to be able to track that down and say, hey, are we getting an honest cross-section sample of the entire population, or are we just getting hotspots because this, a certain group of people have the time and effort to do this, well, and another group of people is out there trying to earn a living still.
And you are 100% correct. And I'll continue to drill on the fact that we have ran into that roadblock in other communities where we lean so heavily on, just a survey or just an open house to get 99% of our feedback. That's why it's crucial to stay, be able to adapt to new conditions, and that's why we offer different technology options for folks who.
Population, I look at it as you have your activists, you have your zealots, and you have everybody else. Okay?
Right.
And the activists and zealots are the ones that are out there with the voice, the attention, but the folks that just go to work every day and try to raise a family, those are the ones that we need to hear from more, because they're the ones that are actually paying the bills for us now.
So let's get back to so you're just getting close to time, if it's not time, especially with the influx of people to the coastal areas.
Yes, sir.
That we're seeing from other states and all. I'm sure you deal primarily with coastal towns, or
we as of recently have worked in quite a few more coastal communities than in the past. We have as I showed on our kind of project team, we have a few new team members out of Palace Point, North Carolina, which is in the Outer Banks, who specialize in coastal community work, who we've been able to learn and partner with on a lot, and that's why our focus has shifted to more of a coastal land use planning approach.
Anybody else have questions? Well, yeah, we certainly appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Because it's a topic that's dear to everybody's heart. So we want to preserve our heritage and our culture and our land, but at the same time we realize we're going to grow. So we've got to do it responsibly, and I'm sure you guys can probably help us.
I think so, and we're appreciative of the time you all have allowed us to be here with you this evening. Our information is with staff. We're able to send over anything else that may help you all out, but certainly look forward to hopefully working with the community.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, and we're going to take a 5-minute break here. So if anybody wants to get up and stretch your legs, use the restroom, whatever the case may be. So it's 7:19. So let's say 7:25. Come back.
Pretty strict 5-minute break right there.
Well, I was telling her back, I said, you know we can talk.
People still, these are the people that are paying our taxes.
I'm with you.
Raising our, oh, goodness.
I'm with you.
Good to meet you, John.
Camera, put me in second class.
Well,
You're just taking it all in.
I'm taking it all
Yeah.
in.
And that's probably wise, but
Yeah, that's okay. All right, thank you.
that, like, especially when you got it all in, you know,
Doing great.
had a basis to put my feet down.
I take that.
There you go.
You know how to find us too.
I'm familiar with that. Six combat deployments. One of those I remember playing back, knocking up doors. So, why not? Like the cat. Finding out who is out. That's the only way you can do an analysis of who really belongs there and who really doesn't. You know, and I know how to break down. You said art. Flashback. How we do it is. That and Palantir. Palantir's AI. I can collect data of setting us up. Fine.
Here for a couple of years, model.
Where I can find my bad guys based on all this raw data. Because they use really logarithmic things, really. And every time, 99% of the time, we need to be able to get our bad guys off of stuff that you never sit down with. You'd have to be Sherlock Holmes to fill this entire room with sticky post-its and pieces.
Yeah, I know. He's actually in Raleigh.
Well, they had supercomputers back there.
So our headquarters is here. We now have 10 offices.
All they do.
Okay. Well, we're a little bit of everywhere. I mentioned I could live on Dr. Ford across the street. I know the community very well.
Identify not only where
planning
who
work
it was.
up with our department.
And certainly
Here, I myself am out of Raleigh. I work in the Wilmington office quite a bit.
like, what time did you get up? Where did you go? Where was the best place for it?
We did.
That's the beauty.
No, that was code writing. Code writing, individual who, the firm is Chattanooga.
You need to see that fast.
I did those.
Those also.
Yeah. We have handled a lot of entitlements. I was like, I have a lot of teammates who live there. But this is, yeah, we were actually talking to them about a lot of things too. Oh, okay. So only municipal lines? Boring. No, well, 95% of my day-to-day is as well. It's hard to say, but we've got a place down here, and that's Football Creek. We actually, we had a place on Queens Creek for another couple, 15 years. And, sold that. Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm biased. I'll always be. Since I was real little, this has been our town.
It's so crazy how
No doubt about it.
I guess it would affect more of like the fast food, like businesses, that's probably the
We're maybe a 5-minute boat drive to the bridge and to the ICW. On your way to have fun. So,
I would probably like park anywhere they don't.
Beautiful spot. That's hard to get better. That's still a lot of Corbin land too. I learned through obviously the name of the street was actually the old town doctor, down the Farm Road doctor. All that family land is still Corbin land. Very low density residential. The builder of our house here in Queens Creek. He did the river with me. I do love over too.
It was very nice to have backup from people.
I
mean, I think they value what I say, but it's nice to hear.
I know, I get jealous all the time. I don't
Yeah, especially when people are very, very opinionated and they don't necessarily.
I don't know if you need it, but
I'm gonna,
give those other fellows with your card too. Thank you so much.
all right, so let's get too long for you. I read the questions. You read it.
Okay. All right, folks. Let's come back in session, please. All right, guys. All right, let's go. We're already 2 minutes behind. Okay. I'm gonna do it again. All right, let's come to session, please. And Rebecca's going to go over the next session for us. And I guess it's just your presentation.
All right. Is this on? So now we're going to kind of segue into our Unified Development Ordinance. So whereas they said multiple times the Camo Land Use Plan is just to advise, our UDO is actually our regulatory document that I reference every day. So it's found in Chapter 152 of our town code, and it's always available to search and research online, and I included the link. It is linked directly through our website, too, for any of you guys or any of the public who ever want to search or reference anything. So the zoning regulations in this chapter are in accordance with our Camo Land Use Plan. They are connected. The chapter is designed to provide for the growth of the town. It mostly references development guidelines of any sort. So it's effective throughout the town's planning jurisdiction, which is our city limits, as well as our ETJ, which is our extraterritorial jurisdiction, which it's not completely reflected on that map, but we do have maps that show city limits versus our ETJ, if anyone is curious to see that distinction. So just to go into zoning a little bit more, our planning jurisdiction is divided into districts whose locations and boundaries are shown on our zoning map. We have the map pulled up here, but if anyone ever wanted to look at it digitally, it's on our website as well. I have a big map in my office, so there's a lot of resources if anyone is ever curious. The best way that I use on a day-to-day basis is the Onzo GIS. You can search whatever address or parcel ID, and there's a layer on there where you can pull up the zoning. So that's mostly what I've referenced, but we do have our big physical maps as well. And you can see on this slide, it just shows the different zoning categorizations. So we have business, we have industrial, we have government educational, and we have a lot of residential and agricultural zones as well. Any questions on any of that before I continue? And I will say there are different development regulations based on which zoning district you're in. So dependent on what the category is intended for, that's what the development regulations are steered towards. Here's our zoning map, like I said. Did you have a question? Mm-hmm. Yep, I'll go over that. It is on this slide that I have pulled up right now. Yeah. And it's also in our UDO. There's a whole section that defines each of those before you get to this table. Yep. So this is our table of permitted and special uses. It's found in section 152.179. And this, I would say, is my first step in navigating any sort of question that I get, whether it's from a citizen, a business owner, a developer. This is normally always my first step, is this chart. So you can see on your desk, it has pretty much any type of use that you could think of. And it also, on the top part, has all of our zoning districts. So based on the symbol that's provided with the use in accordance to the zoning district, it lets you know whether or not it's permitted in that area or not. So the different symbols you see, the main one that you see most often is P, which means it's permitted. It's an allowed use. They don't have to go through any approval process. It's an allowed use. So for instance, a good example would be in B1, which is our business zone district along the highway. Say we had a restaurant that wanted to come in. They could come to staff and say, I want to open a restaurant at this location. I would go to the chart and look for restaurant, and it would be P, permitted, in B1. So it's a use by right. They're allowed to open. The next one you will see is S, which means it's a special use permit. That is more reserved for bigger ticket items like multifamily development is what we mostly see it under. That means it has to go through a quasi-judicial application process to where it goes through the planning board for recommendation, and then it goes to you all to go through the hearing and to make a decision based off 4 criteria that are in the ordinance. So that one's reserved for the biggest type of development that needs a little bit more of a review process. Next, you'll see US, which means a use standard. That means it is permitted, but there is certain specific standards that it would have to meet in order to qualify to be permitted. So, for example, say there's a church that wants to go in and it's a use standard in a certain district, and there may be more specific regulations as far as parking or lighting or hours or whatever it may be for the specific use to make it a little bit more functionable. That's the purpose of that. And then the next one you would see is MS, which is a minor special use. It's, again, reserved for some of those bigger ticket items. It actually goes before our Board of Adjustments for review process, whether it's approved or not, based on standards as well. And then another important distinction is that if an area or a use is not permitted typically it's indicated by a blank space. So if you're looking at a use and you're wanting to know if it's permitted in that zoning district, if it's blank, that means it's not allowed to be there. That's the basic function of the table. Do you guys have any questions for me on that? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It means it's allowed in all of those, it's allowed in those zoning districts that you just labeled with use standards to go along with it. So just a couple extra standards that it would have to meet. Mhm. And we did, yeah. Was it 2023 that we did the overall? In 2023, I believe it was, we did a subcommittee with a couple board members and staff, and we went through line by line each use to kind of give an update and change what we thought based on development would be a good update. So it has been recently updated in its entirety, and we also see frequent small text amendments for specific uses. So it is a living document for sure, but it's the main reference and guideline for pretty much all development that we see in town. Any questions on that before I keep going?
That's one we can.
Can I just want to make a comment. Jeff and I were on that committee,
Mhm.
as were people from the planning board and people from staff. This took a lot of time and a lot of work and a lot of research.
Right.
And I still think it's a good product. It wasn't looked at very quickly, and everyone had input from different areas.
Mhm.
So this document really is a good document. Standards, are really important, like you indicated. There are specific standards under some of these, and you have to meet those standards. So I just wanted to comment that this was a very difficult document to go through in its entirety, but we did.
Yeah, it was multiple months process where we would meet, was it once a week and spend an hour or two on it. So yeah, it was reviewed very, very detailed.
Yeah, I believe this was one of the first things you started working on here with.
Yep.
And,
with Andrea. Mhm.
yeah, as the two of you know,
Yes, it was a very good learning experience for the functions of the table for sure.
hours and many days,
Mhm.
days of sitting in here, going line by line, debating everything and making sure that, everything was pretty much up to snuff equally.
Mhm.
And, so we could find each category and put them all together. So, yeah, I agree with Pat, and I'm not just saying it because I worked on it, but, a lot of time and effort the staff put in, to making this what it is.
Mhm.
I agree. It was a lot of hard work went into this, without a doubt. Is how much, as we heard tonight, the process starts with data collection.
Mhm.
And the process starts out with a vision and the values. And this document was probably concrete evidence of the last survey, of the last process. The process hasn't been really complete from zero, or what we like to say is soup to nuts, when we're, hey, we've got something, but now we've got a lot of change that's happened in the past almost 20 years. And we may take a look at the ingredients and add more ingredients into the pot and come up with something entirely different. But this is what he was referring to when he says, hey, this is what leads to concrete results at the end. All of that stuff starts with data collection. And that's how you look at any problem that you face when you're doing problem framing. And it's sort of familiar to what we do, or I've done in my past career, which is military planning or any plan. It's called the planning process. It starts with problem framing. Do we have an issue? If we determine, yes, we have an old land use plan, an old CAMA plan based on 2009 data. Well, Swansboro has changed a lot since 2009, and we got twice the town population we had almost back between then and now. So what I'm saying is, we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater for the sake of doing it, Pat. we're going to look at all of the data that's going to be data driven from the ground up.
Oh,
And if
sure.
this remains consistent, that process will bear it out.
It will.
But this is an end result based on the beginning to end process. That's all I'm saying. So I'm just reminding everybody tonight what that is. I'm not married to anything that you're showing me. I'm not even married to their process fully yet until we get a chance to discuss as a board and decide to spend some money and do this thing. If we decide that this is the team that we're going to choose even to go with, which we aren't even there yet. But tonight was a very educational process, and I'm glad you brought them in because they were able to explain to me in a very comprehensive way how data does drive a process, and once I figured that out very quickly, it made 100% logical sense to me.
We've enjoyed working with them. We've done a lot of other grant-related projects, so I thought they would be a good fit. I do just want to clarify, the process they described is just for our CAMA land use plan. It wouldn't involve anything with our UDO like the table that we're looking at right now. I just wanted to clarify that. I mean, you as a board can always decide to edit it based off the results of that, but they are two separate entities. Yeah.
Come up with
Okay, I just wanted to make that clarification.
So you have more to present, or is that pretty much?
I just one more
I
slide.
just got one question.
Sure, yeah.
So is there a file somewhere that delineates what let's just take the first one, accessory uses structure incidental to any okay. Is there a file somewhere that would tell you what goes under each category, adult care home?
We have a whole definition section that defines each of these uses
I was sure you did.
in
but-
detail. And then, as you can see as well, a lot of the uses reference notes. So the section below this, 152.180 is the whole note section. So, for example, food trucks that we'll be talking about in a little bit, there is a note attached to that use, and it has additional standards and guidelines that have to be met.
So when somebody puts an application, do you actually sit down with them and say, this is what is,
Yep.
okay.
Yep, that's one of the main parts of my job is taking calls and visits from citizens, and if they have ideas, then I go through the process of whether it is allowed or not, and I give them reason why and show them the ordinance. Yeah.
What does MS stand for?
A minor special use.
Say again?
Minor special use.
Looking at the adult care home says it's in the R20 SF. That's for a single family home. I was like, okay.
I don't know if we're going to get into the specifics of all the uses, but
I
again,
know, and I'm not trying to cherry pick you and put you
Yeah.
on the spot. That was the first one I looked at, and I didn't know what the MS.
a minor special use. So it just means there's a little bit more of a stringent review process, and it has to go before the Board of Adjustments to be approved to develop.
Yeah, because I'm sorry. I thought the adult establishment was right below it. No.
Okay. Yeah, no, it is. You can lose your place when you're going across sometimes, so you
can.
have to be careful. Yeah.
Like all spreadsheets.
Okay. And this is just in summary. We could spend hours and hours talking about all the details of the UDO, but these are some of the, I feel like, standout sections that I reference frequently throughout the day. A big one is our historic district. There's a whole separate set of guidelines and design standards that apply to the historic district, different from the rest of the town. So if you've never looked at that, I definitely encourage you to review that. That's a big part of my job. Our flood damage prevention ordinance is another very big regulatory section that has very specific details on development in specific flood zones. So that is something that stands out from regular development guidelines as well. We have a whole section on subdivision regulations, and we also have a section on architectural standards for new commercial development that's within our gateway corridor, which you can see on our CAMA land use map right here. It's that blue hatched area along 24, and that is just to make sure that we're having both structurally sound but also visually appealing development with people going through town right along 24. So Well, the historic board's just for the historic district, but it is a little bit similar. It's more of a aesthetic value. So those are the standout sections that I thought would be worth mentioning. But again, there is hundreds of subsections in our UDO. So if you guys ever have any questions on anything specific, I'm happy to help you on that. And you guys did ask last night for us to spend a little bit of brief discussion on the food truck ordinance. So I did print that out for everyone, and you guys can lead the discussion or guide me with whatever you'd like to know, unless you have any more questions about the UDO in general.
Your last bullet there, architectural standards. My first vision on that is Waters Hardware, where it has a brick facial on it,
Mm-hmm.
metal building. If he desired to add a building on his property,
Mm-hmm.
do regular, that has to be 100% brick.
I'm not sure about that in entirety. He hasn't come to me for any sort of review, or I would encourage him to give me a call or come meet with me, and I'm happy to sit down with him and go over the.
I guess somewhere in there was a question.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the fact that commercial building, whether it be a store, whether I'm building a new store or an additional building to my operation,
Mm-hmm.
is it required to be brick?
Yeah, that's more of a very specific question. That's case by case. So I would encourage that to be more of a separate discussion, and he can come with what his ideas are.
I'm not talking about Mr. Waters, I'm talking about in general.
Yeah.
So
I know it's not a straightforward answer, but it really just depends on each
It's
on each
kind of like
scenario.
a grandfather clause type thing.
Well, grandfather means
Well, It,
That it was
it
already
depends on
there.
where it is. It depends on what they're wanting to do. So again, it really is just a case by case scenario. So I would encourage that to be probably a separate discussion if there's
Okay.
specific questions about it.
all right.
I got a question specific to the food cart. I mean, I think this is a diagram that you're trying to show us that within the circles is where they're allowed to go,
Mm-hmm.
but they can be permitted for, right? And then
Yes.
you showed me something that was interesting, Elisa did, was the Gateway Corridor, which has the built up of all the the strip malls and the auto parts stores and all the places that people go to do commerce in town.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that blue line that extends through the entire
Yep.
town, up to 100 feet
Mm-hmm.
off the road, right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, I'm defining it. So here's an easy one, just have we considered including the Gateway Corridor for food carts?
Well,
That-
it is
I'm-
related.
I'm just putting it out there, that's informational. It just would, to me, there's not a big difference in between the pig and all the way down to the Walmart and the Mavic Tire store, and gives a whole lot more territory for a whole lot more commerce to be done. And they still have to follow the rules. They need permission of the people who own the property, you know?
I would.
It would just
say-
make life more consistent, I think, across the board, because when you're on West Corbett Avenue, and this is just my impression, you don't have to answer this, I'm not asking questions. West Corbett Avenue, one end from the other, looks just like the rest of it, all the way down to hit Marine Chevrolet, or Team Chevrolet. From the time I leave here, all the way down. There's not a lot of change. It's, other than strip mall, store, okay, tire store, Walmart, Food Line, got it. Okay, looks like any other small town USA that's growing. So why couldn't you include the Gateway Corridor? Because it's not specified in the ordinance itself. I'm just asking the board to probably give it some thought.
Could I share what my concerns would be for potentially? So if we said you can use the Gateway Corridor as an allowed area to set up food trucks, given that you meet the criteria, that would include, as you can see, a plethora of different zoning districts and uses. So not just business, but rural and residential, and some of those areas may not be conducive for setting up food trucks. So that's why currently we just have it in our business districts that it's allowed.
Could you come up with a scenario that would be difficult for a food truck anywhere on the Gateway Corridor with permission of the landowner? We would have a problem with safety or health or
I'd say even if
transportation.
yeah, I mean, it's a good point. It is right off 24. It's visible. It's easily accessible. But even if the landowner agrees, there may be abutting properties that would prefer not to have a food truck right there, which I think is an important factor to consider if it is in a residentially zoned district.
So, can I say something? So correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just for information today. I'm not clear that we should be discussing more than just looking at this until we have a meeting. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, we're not making a decision on anything.
No, I know, but we're asking questions that should be brought up more in a meeting.
Going forward, yeah. Discussion is probably okay, yeah.
So I guess that's what we'd like to see. I think where Doug was headed to.
No, I see your point.
Thought-provoking.
Just because the food truck matter came up at yesterday's meeting, I looked at the note 30 that I think you've got copies of the note 30, which is really the substantive regulations of the town regarding food trucks. It's my opinion that one standard that is in note 30 is that food trucks need to be located in one of the nodes, the suburban or the town center gate. Let's see, I call them nodes, but they've got specific traditional town center, suburban town center, or employment / light industrial node, and the regulations concerning food trucks simply reference these areas shown in the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan does not include any substantive regulation. Comprehensive plan doesn't have anything to do about the specific use of a food truck. So it's my opinion that if you wanted to look more closely at the regulations pertaining to food trucks, including what districts are allowed and also the use standards, the extra use standards that apply to food trucks as a use. And I say food trucks, the code lumps food trucks along with food carts. It would require a zoning change, but you wouldn't need to change the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan doesn't say anything, it just sets up these nodes, and the food truck regulations say that they need to be located in one of these three nodes. There may be some confusion concerning the comprehensive plan and what it's all about, and the UDO regulations concerning food trucks. I don't think you need any kind of comprehensive plan amendment, that's my opinion, if you want to change regulations pertaining to food trucks. Those would be UDO amendments only. Just as a point of clarification, I think there was some conversation that perhaps there needed to be both changes, comprehensive plan changes and also zoning ordinance changes. I don't think that's so. If you want to take a second look at food truck laws. Take a new look at food truck. I think that's obviously for the board's determination. If that particular special standard that applies to food trucks, that they need to be located in one of these four categories, three categories of nodes, if that's a food truck regulation that you think is overly restrictive, that's obviously your call on whether that needs to be amended, should be amended.
As Bill has demonstrated tonight, none of us are in charge. You guys really run the day-to-day of the town. But in order for us to function better, I think sometimes you guys need to ask us pointed questions to make your job easier. Saying, hey, can you recommend we do these things? And that takes communication. It means you got to pick up the phone or drop us an email or do something that says, hey, I need your attention board on this matter. And it can happen in an informal setting like this. We're not making decisions tonight, but these are some of the things we learn about each other in the process. Don't look at me as the guy in charge. Look at me as the guy that just am part of the process. Okay? That you have to come through the board in order to get something done. But that doesn't mean I sit at the top of this thing or I'm not in charge of anybody. I just represent the people here. And I look, my logical brain to say, how can we get rid of some of the bureaucracy and make everybody's job easier? The person that runs the food court and the person that hands the permits out for the food court. That's what I'm looking for. I don't want archaic stuff, and I think tonight I'll label this under don't handcuff decision makers. At the end of the day, you have to decide on how to run the town as town manager. At the end of the day, you have to decide whether to issue the permit or not. Tell me how I can make that job easier for you. Yep.
All right, so go ahead. Did you want to say something?
So with the food trucks,
Talking to the microphone.
talking to the
please.
microphone, a lot of consideration went into what a food truck would make the Gateway Corridor look like. If we expanded the food truck allowance to be anywhere and everywhere along Highway 24, are we going to have a gamut of food trucks come in and we're just going to be looking at food trucks down the line? That was one of the big things that the boards thought about when they were looking into establishing this. Because before we didn't allow them at all, but somebody wanted to come, so an amendment came forward. Other things that were considered when they were doing the food trucks was where they were in correspondence to other businesses because they would be noisy because they have to have generators. That's another reason why they said we didn't want music, because they would have generators. And enforcement, that was the other thing. That's why there was regulations put on the duration of them. We didn't want somebody to be in a spot and the lawn get mowed around the truck because it never got moved. That's why we put durations on that. And as far as the tax revenue question that Joe asked last night, when a food truck comes into town, there's nothing that tells anybody that a person in Swansboro bought that for us to get any tax revenue from it. So the food trucks do not give anything back to the town tax revenue wise.
Other than the permit.
Just the permit.
Only the permit fee is the only revenue the town gets for the food trucks.
And that was my concern last night. Somebody could come from Rocky Mount, set up, make $1,000 in profit, and gone.
And then the town wouldn't even get anything back from that because there's nothing that says.
$100
a day.
No, it's $100 a day.
It's $500 for a year, or if they want to get a day permit, it's $100 for a day permit.
So anyway, I'm in agree. My personal opinion is we leave it like it is, but that's just my personal opinion.
It's functioned since 2021. I mean, it is designed to be
Okay.
a little restrictive, but that was the thought behind doing it, is we wanted to have them come, but in a smart, thoughtful way. So that was I wasn't here, but that's my understanding of why the rules that are here were set in place.
And that's a very good point about lining it with food trucks down the road. You look like you're at the county fair or something,
Well, there's one sitting down here in Cedar Point right now, very prominent.
So
Big orange flame.
do you have more?
Nope, this was the last part. You guys wanted to have a discussion on food trucks, so just any guidance that you wanted to give on that.
Okay, so I guess that pretty much concludes everything. Can I get a motion to close?
Go ahead,
A second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, thank you. It was, yep.
It was nice.
I know you put a lot of work into it, too.
Thank you, Rebecca.
I didn't know it was going to be contentious tonight.
I just,
Is that true?
You had to go to the hospital.
You got one of those cards.
The middle one.
Yep.
Public, no, you can, oh, they're not, or, yes,
That's what
all the professional level.
Yep, we went over it today.
Yeah,
Just check into it.
Craig Murphy.
Yep.